All right. All right. If I've done everything correctly, we should be live. My name is Ryan Tower. This is Living in the Logos. Thank you so much for being here. This will be our very first episode, hopefully, one of many to come in the future. Some of the things that I'm working on in the background here, I ask for your apology or ask for your forgiveness ahead of time if the sound isn't exactly perfect. I'm kind of working on the lighting, kind of working on the sound at the same time. So hopefully, we can get those things dialed in. But I didn't want these things to be too high production value. I just kind of wanted to hang out and talk about some things that are going on. Lord knows there's been a lot happening. But before we get into all that, I just wanted to let you guys know that I appreciate your attention. I know that time is really valuable nowadays. I know it's easy to click around on the internet and find things to use up your time. So I appreciate you spending the time with me. And if you happen to catch this, I hope you can leave a comment. If you can, share it with people who you think might enjoy watching or listening. And if you could let me know what you think, if there are ways that you think I might be able to improve what I'm doing, information that you might think I need to know about, please let me know in the comments down below. And I guess it's worth prefacing this whole thing with I understand that the type of information that I talk about is not exactly easy to promulgate on the internet, especially in the context of our present political climate. So it's really going to be up to people like yourself and other people that come across the content to share it with other people. And I really really appreciate you doing that. And I recognize that obviously everybody is not going to agree with me. I recognize that, and I do recognize as well that the topics are emotional and sensitive for some people. So I know that not a lot of people enjoy talking about politics, and I'm hoping that I can provide a if nothing else, a different perspective than what you're used to as far as political commentary goes. And yeah, we'll get into that more. But I just wanted to say it's really going to be us doing the work to begin with to get the information out there, and I hope that you can help me doing that, and I appreciate it. So I recognize that it's not exactly an easy pitch to come online and share that you've decided that you wanted to share your political opinions with the world. I recognize that that's not uncommon, and I'm cognizant of the fact that, like I said, not everybody really loves politics, but we're all tired. We're all pretty fed up with the back and forth that we've seen. I'm 36 now, so I've seen a good 20 plus years of the political discourse that was just, it's been fairly unbearable. So I understand how people feel, but I do think that if we take a step back and we give ourselves an opportunity to see things from a wider perspective, it's possible for us to come to conclusions that are helpful and actionable, and we don't end up getting caught in the path of talking in circles or talking past each other. So I just wanted to start off by saying I'm not pretending like I have a perfect grasp of everything. Of course, I don't think that I know everything. I don't think that even necessarily that I know better than anybody else about certain things. Of course, I do have a kind of expertise in theology and philosophy, but I recognize that when it comes to politics, I'm hoping that the ideas themselves can be judged for what they are. And I've tried to do that, I think, fairly honestly in my approach and in my research that's led me to where I am. And I hope we can continue that on the channel. I want to offer a perspective that's unique and different, but not with the intent of sticking our heads in the sand or ignoring the reality and the way things actually are. And I paid pretty close attention to the political discourse for more than 20 years now. I've always kind of had a passion for knowing the truth, for understanding how things work and why the world is the way it is, like everybody, I've had an evolution in my thought from when I was younger to where I am now. I've changed my mind on a lot of things, and I encourage people to be open to new ideas, and I try and stay that way as well. But I do have my positions that I consider um, inviolable, and we'll get into that kind of stuff later. But I just wanted to say that I'm not new to politics. I just haven't really been doing this kind of thing publicly ever. Um, as it started, when I was younger, I was I'm telling you guys all this because I'm going to be sharing political insights, and I think it's fair and transparent that kind of how I feel about politics. And the best way for me to tell you is kind of how I ended up to where I am today. So when I was younger and I first kind of was introduced to the idea of politics, it was certainly from a leftist perspective. I grew up reading kind of revolutionary ideology from the 60s, people like Abby Hoffman and the Howard Zinn, that kind of stuff, Noam Chomsky later on, Hunter Thompson, when I was in my teens. So that kind of ideology really made up the frame of reference that I had all the way until I really became an adult into my later 20s. But after, when I was about 18, going through this cycle of kind of figuring out that things are not quite the way that we've been told, and that there's, I was putting the pieces together, so to speak, and that there's kind of this power structure that exists beyond both the parties. But at that time, it was easy to see the right wing being associated with the Bushes and such. It was very easy to see that as evil back then. And so when I was about 18, a friend of mine introduced me to what I would loosely call the truth movement. He had a TV show at the Community Access Channel here in Manchester, New Hampshire, and one of the producers there at the channel handed me a large stack of DVDs that was all different kinds of documentaries, probably all the ones that you've seen if you've been involved in the truth community. A lot of the more obvious ones were in there, Loose Change and Endgame and stuff like that. So when I was 19, I started listening to InfoWars and kind of got into a whole different realm than just the strictly leftist kind of liberal, revolutionary, socialist ideology, however you want to think of that. But yeah, so since then I've come a long way, and I think a lot of people have been in the same camp if their evolution started when they were in their early adulthood, and they're maybe in their mid 20s to mid 30s, 40s now. We all had a similar experience. I think obviously not everybody drew the same conclusions from it, but I think a lot of people will probably understand that kind of evolution and thinking. And so it was really trying to understand how power works that kept this drive going in me and the desire to try and figure out what was going on. And I want to be clear, I don't have any delusions of grandeur. I don't believe that necessarily my ideas are exceptionally unique or important. I don't believe that what I'm saying here in any episode is really going to change the world in any significant way. I don't think that I don't want it to become a leader of any kind of political movement. I'm not interested really in any of that. It's really just meant to be a process of discovery with you guys and for myself as well, and self-reflection, among other things. And there are some interesting things happening with AI that have led me to join the public discourse now, and we can talk about that stuff later. But I just wanted to be known that my intentions are very realistic. I would like to do this full time, to do commentary full time in the future. So I'm gonna continue working at it, try and work my way up to 1,000 followers, first and foremost. So that's kind of my conception of things, and I don't have the intention of any political movements, or I believe in some of them, but I don't have the intention of being a leader, is my point. And I guess besides that, and by way of introduction, the only other thing I wanted to mention is I am an Orthodox Christian, so I go to a Russian Orthodox church. If that matters to you, I figured I should mention it because it's an important part of my worldview, and it's not a conclusion that I arrived at in a casual way. It was many years of inquiry that had led me in that direction, and I'm grateful for the path that I've been on, and I would have never guessed that I would end up where I am now. And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way as well. But I think it's important for you guys to know kind of where my worldview is, and my intention with the channel is not to make this into a a place for people to be browbeat about their lack of faith or different kind of faith. I do have my beliefs, and I'm committed to them, and I'm open to discuss those things. But my intention with the channel is really to offer a place for people to come and think about the world, especially politics and philosophy, in a way that they might not have before. So there's so many good YouTube channels out there right now that are doing theology that you can find, people that I respect and look up to and have learned immensely from. So I don't know that there's really a necessity for someone to be doing Orthodox theology, and I really respect the hierarchy of the church, and being still a catechumen, I'm not really in the place to be teaching theology. So I just wanted to be clear about that because I care about it, and it just in way of transparency, I want you guys to know where I come from. I am politically right leaning. I would definitely describe myself as right wing, although I only use that term in the sense that people use it today, and that's the only reason it exists. So I do have some left, I guess, some left leaning ideologies. I do believe in social programs and things like that, and we can get into that in the future. I am pro white. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. I know that race is going to be a touch and go issue for a lot of people, and that's something that I really intend to tackle in a more thorough and academic way, because I do think there is space in the world for that kind of subject matter to be discussed in a way that's objective and not necessarily as sensational and as emotional as you see it maybe on Twitter and places like that. And what else did I want to mention? Let's see. I guess that's pretty much it by way of introduction. I appreciate you sitting through that. If you don't know me, if you do know me and you found me from Facebook or from one of my other social media channels, then you're probably pretty aware with about how I think about things. And now there's been a lot going on. I mean, we all know the situation with Trump and what has been happening is pretty intense. People have strong opinions. There's been some genuinely important turn of events that's happened recently. Of course, we have what the situation with Israel and Iran, and we have just the presence of Trump in general and the impact that he's had on the political discourse, what the MAGA movement means as such. I mean, all these things are interesting questions, and what I wanted to do tonight is just get a test stream down and just to do some talking and see how the microphone works, how the lighting goes, and just to see how everything looks. And at the same time, I'm excited to talk about this because I do think that there's an enormous amount of misunderstanding as far as Trump goes in the world. And I'm not saying that as somebody who's, a plan truster or somebody who's a diehard Trump follower. I didn't vote in the last two elections because I really didn't believe that any of the candidates were making commitments that were worthy of people voting for them. And I recognize that's, maybe some people see that as a cop out. I don't, obviously, but I understand. I just understand how the zeitgeist works, and I think a lot of people are coming to realize that too. And we'll talk more about that in the future. But Trump is a really fascinating character in terms of politics because in 2016 he obviously portrayed himself as somebody who was meant to shake up the political system. He campaigned as somebody that was outside of the box. He was going to be um, a new perspective. I mean, he made some pretty radical speeches when he first came on the scene about campaign financing, about Hillary Clinton. I mean, we all know the story from 2016. And the thing that I wanted to say about that is it was wise on Trump's behalf and on behalf of his campaign because they really captured and channeled a growing momentum that was happening at the time where people were and still are, I would say, genuinely fed up with the two-party system. But what happens is that emotions and marketing get into people's brains, and every 4 years they're drawn back into this. It's almost like an emotional trap where they guilt trip you into saying if you don't vote, then the other person is going to win, and that person is going to be so bad that it's unimaginable. And you know how it goes. It's always the most important election of our lifetimes, and this cycle repeats itself over and over again. And so Trump, obviously, and the people who managed his campaign were aware of this sentiment that existed, especially in the working middle class, people who are noticing that their currency is becoming devalued. They're noticing that the foreigners coming into the country are receiving better treatment often than they are. There's a lot of these things that were bubbling up at the time and that Trump took advantage of. And I would say that line of awakening goes all the way back to September 11th and the sequence of events that led up to Trump stepping onto the scene. I think it's clear looking back that it was a smart move what they did, and although I believe dishonest, and we're going to get into that. And And the thing that we have to understand about Trump, and this is kind of the crux of the issue, and it's the most simple part and also the easiest to overlook, it seems, is that when people talk about politics, they will often toss around phrases like, oh, follow the money, and pay to play, all these ideas about how money rules the world, it's the root of all evil. And for some reason, every time during an election season, people will see data points like Elon Musk donating over $200 million to Trump's campaign, or Timothy Mellon from the Mellon banking dynasty donating over $100 million to Trump's campaign, or Miriam Adelson donating over $100 million to Trump's campaign. Now, when people see this kind of thing, they shrug their shoulders and they say like, oh, well, obviously, the billionaires, they pay, and then but the thing is that politics is essentially, in the context that we live in, politics is essentially whoever pays the candidates to get elected is going to get the things they want from the administration. All right. So the only leverage that we have as working class people, as people who don't have $100-200 million to donate to a candidate to get our goals taken care of, we have the only bargaining we really have is our vote. And in some sense, people will make the argument that that in itself is even illusory. And I don't think that's true. I do believe that in not necessarily the power of the vote, but the power of the candidate perceiving you giving or not giving the vote, and the impact that that has on the discourse. And so when people are campaigning, the people that are going to vote for them have to be very serious about getting specific and detailed commitments from the candidates before they vote for them. It seems very simple, but every election season, people forget this, and they get caught up in the emotion, and they get caught up in the guilt tripping, and they get caught up in the most important election of our lifetimes yet again. And then they disregard all of the information that tells them not to do what they think they shouldn't do. And it happens every 4 years. And it's really a trip when you step outside of it and you see it happen over and over again. It's frustrating in a sense, but it's enlightening in another way. But we have to think about, when we think about Donald Trump, the only thing that we should really be considering is who is paying for that to happen. And once you do that, it's very clear what's going on. The people who paid for Trump to be in office are the technocratic elite. That would be Elon Musk, the PayPal mafia, and Silicon Valley. And the Mellon banking family is kind of a behind the scenes group. They're well known throughout history. You can do some Googling on them if you'd like. But they're interested in getting they're interested in the finance aspect of Trump's administration, which is complicated. But needless to say, Timothy Mellon, who contributed this money, is getting what he wanted from Trump's administration, right? And then the other faction that is represented in Trump's campaign finance is Miriam Adelson. And Miriam Adelson is a Jewish billionaire that owns some of the settlement properties. These are properties that were stolen from Palestinian people that live there, and who knows how or what or why. I don't know the details, and I don't want to get into it, but she is the heiress of Sheldon Adelson's fortune, and she's a diehard Zionist Jew that is clearly getting what she wanted out of Trump's campaign, right? And so once we understand that campaign finance is what determines the actions, the personnel, and the administration and the direction that it goes in, we have to ask ourselves, what do these three factions, these group of people that were responsible for Trump's campaign for the most part, what do these people have on their agenda? What are they trying to do? And it just so turns out, when you look at the results of the campaign, you look at the results of the administration so far, and granted we're early, but it's not too early. It's been long enough for us to see some legitimate, tangible results. And all of those legitimate, tangible results are in favor of the technocratic elite and the Jewish financiers. And this isn't, I'm not a Trump derangement guy. I'm not delusional about the reality of politics in America. I'm just simply saying that objectively, Trump took $300 plus million from very specific people that have very specific desires, and he's now doing those things that they asked him to do. And there's tons of evidence. We don't have to go far to look for it. I mean, Trump was pretty willing to bend over backwards for Netanyahu. This goes on and on. I mean, it's not a mystery to anybody. What I do think people need to think about is once you start thinking in terms of what is the agenda of the people that paid for the campaign, then we can start thinking accurately about what we can do about it, right? So if we're aware that the technocratic elite want to push forward with AI, with mass surveillance, and we know that the Jewish financiers want to push forward with regime change in Iran, it's pretty clear when we look at the world that those are the exact things that are happening. And Trump was very willing to go to bat for Israel and for the Jews that paid for him to be there, and he was very willing to go to bat for Elon until Elon double crossed him, and we're going to get into this in a second. The obvious result, all I'm trying to say is that the obvious result is that Trump is doing what he was paid to do. And you could even make the argument that the people who are funding Trump's campaign, even though there are two factions that are somewhat now competing for the power of the administration, that would be Elon's faction and Miriam Adelson's, or the Jewish lobby, you could say in general. Even though they are competing in some sense for their ability to have access to the court of Trump, so to speak, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily enemies. It just means that the pool of capital that Trump is able to execute decisions and influence over is going to be directed in a certain way. And there can be disagreement about how that goal is achieved. There can be different paths that get to the same result. But still, at the end of the day, the same pool of capital is going to go in the same direction. And that direction is going to be increasing support of Israel and increasing contracts and military industrial complex profits, banking sector profits, real estate sector profits. Those are the things that people pay Trump to do. And he will continue to do them. And I think this is the thing that I think makes me so passionate about the situation with Trump, is that a lot of people that I know and care about, people who care about the truth, people who want to quote unquote make America great again, are very easily swept up and deceived by this momentum and this sentiment that Trump seems to be able to draw out of people. And the folks that run and do Trump's marketing and PR are very smart. They have their finger on the pulse. I mean, recently, I would think they've been a big miss, but I mean, all the way up until this administration, I mean, they had a good idea of really what it is that people were looking for. They knew about 4chan, they knew about QAnon, they knew how to play into those ideas so that they could make Trump appear to be an outsider. And I hate to say it, like, fell for it again award. I mean, so many people were swept up in this sentiment and this emotion of make America great again, this really successful marketing and public relations campaign. And I think a lot of them feel betrayed. And I think that they should. I think that they should. And that's a good thing. And so what do we need to do going forward? Well, I said before, we can no longer accept this idea that we're just going to vote opposite of the worst thing. Do you see what I mean by that? We can no longer do this thing where the liberals are so bad and so evil that we have to vote for whoever is standing on the opposite side. And it goes the same way for the people that were so excited to vote for Joe Biden. I understand that we're not being presented good candidates, and that's my point. We can't continue to keep doing this over and over again and expect different results. And I recognize that probably a lot of people are aware of that. Maybe they just have a hard time executing on it. I recognize that there's peer pressure. There's a lot of social pressures with voting, but let me explain what I'm not saying. What I'm not saying is nobody should vote. I'm not saying that we should check out, take the black pill, give up, go back to work, don't worry about the politics anymore. But what I am saying is that we have to be realistic as voters. We have to approach candidates with genuine attempts at getting real commitments. And if it has to be in writing, if it has to be on video, these candidates should genuinely be working for us. I mean, we all know how the system is, supposedly designed. The reality is we live in an oligarchy, and I don't think that's a mystery to very many people. But it seems like the prospect of Trump, this the myth and the ideology of making America great again, which any reasonable person would support. Like it's not a tough idea to get behind. Unfortunately, though, this facade of make America great again was really a Trojan horse, and the Trojan horse, which was who knows how long back this concept or this ideology or this plan goes, so to speak. It seems to me that when Trump came on the scene, he was genuinely an outsider, to some degree, as far as politics goes. I don't know that he was necessarily as nationalist and revolutionary as he portrayed himself, but in 2016, it's a reasonable mistake. After Operation Warp Speed, after all of the decisions and the actions that we've seen on behalf of Trump, it's very difficult for, I think, anybody to commit themselves to another trust me bro. Looking back on the last 6 months, I can't imagine anyone who is looking at this situation and saying and feeling good about trusting the plan, right? And I mean, we're at really unreal levels of mental gymnastics necessary to come up with a narrative in your head to make this look good, right? When Trump first stepped on the scene, just as an example, right, he went and gave a speech. I don't know if it was at AIPAC or I forget where the speech was, but it was in front of a bunch of Jewish Republicans, and he said something along the lines of, not verbatim, but he basically said, listen, you guys aren't going to like me because I'm not going to take your money and I'm not going to be a puppet for you like Marco Rubio. And I mean, this is a direct quote. He really said that to literally a whole room of influential Jewish financiers and people who could pay for his campaign. And the interesting thing is that in the first Trump administration, that first campaign, you might have heard that he set records for the amount of small number donations that he got. So I think it was something like 60 or 70% of his first campaign was funded specifically with donations that were less than $500 or something along those lines. And the exact opposite was true for this most recent campaign. Only 30% of the donations that funded this most recent campaign came from small donors, so basically from the middle class and people not wealthy. And so the writing has kind of been on the wall, but I think it's been tough for people in the right wing to integrate, and I understand that because I think for the most part both sides of the political spectrum care about the country. We both really want things to be better. The difference is that everybody has a different idea of what better is, and I think that Trump succeeded in deceiving because he preyed on this very deep rooted emotion that Americans have to see America become successful again. And I don't think that there's a lot of debate about whether or not we're doing well. I mean, I don't think we're doing well. I think we're hanging in there, I could say. But I don't think anybody would really want to get behind the idea that we're doing well. And in Trump's most recent administration, this past 6 7 months, all that we've really seen is very soft and uncommitted, um, kind of deceptive and uh, just not very transparent language about all of the promises that he's made to his normal voters, his middle class voters, his lower class voters, his not billionaire financier voters. All of us have been given these very blasé statements. Every once in a while he will say something about mass deportations or make some comment about about how there's too many people coming over the border. It's always this small little phrase that we get in the news and everybody shares it online. They're like, look, we told you, like, Trump's going to deport everyone, alligator Alcatraz. And we keep on seeing this, and that I've seen the same cycle happen with every, um, hot button political issue in the administration. And what happens is everybody's attention moves on to the next thing. And then when we revisit the thing from last time, the goalpost is shifted. Like once the attention comes back to the thing we were looking at before, the goalposts have now shifted. And this is the exact same thing that's going to happen with the situation with Epstein. And then this is the last thing I wanted to say before I wrap things up. I apologize if this has been a ramble, but I haven't done really any monologuing in a while. And yeah, I hope that it's concise enough though. So the situation with Epstein is very interesting because Epstein is a very mythical figure. I mean, he literally is a walking Hollywood movie. You know, it's a James Bond, maybe a little bit less, you know, athletic, and but the life that Jeffrey Epstein represents is very important to our understanding of Trump's campaign and of his administration, because this idea that money is capable of determining the direction of the administration rather than the will of the people, which has obviously been the case no matter who's been the president. But with Jeffrey Epstein specifically, the whole world all of a sudden got a glimpse into really the architecture and the machinations that make it possible for our political system to stay corrupted. And I think that most average Americans, I think, have wondered this at some point in time. Like how is it possible that the corruption can stay for so long? Like, how is it that every person gets involved? How is it that there's no honest people? Like, how does it keep on happening? And the truth is that bureaucracy is a thing that's very easy to manipulate once it becomes established, especially. And Epstein represents this nexus between how the more shadowy elements of finance and influence come into the real world of politics. There's like a nexus there that happens, like money laundering, networking, that kind of stuff. There are people who sit at that point of contact, and Jeffrey Epstein was one of those people. And he, you know, he said something really interesting to Michael Wolff, who is a journalist that that actually became pretty close with Jeffrey Epstein, spent something like a decade being his friend, and, you know, talked to him quite a bit, wrote a book about him. And so Jeffrey Epstein said to Michael Wolff, when Michael Wolff asked him how, like, where did all his money come from? And basically, in a paraphrase, Epstein said that he said, I run a reverse Ponzi scheme, where in a Ponzi scheme, you're supposed to make money appear that doesn't exist, whereas in his line of work, the reverse Ponzi scheme, he is supposed to take money that exists and make it so it doesn't exist, right? And if your nation, if your intelligence agency, if your movement, political project, business plans, all of those things, if those things require like clandestine money, then you need somebody like Jeffrey Epstein. And not only do you need somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, but you need swaths of people in Jeffrey Epstein's orbit that need Jeffrey Epstein's money. Do you see what I mean? So this dependent structure is not difficult to cultivate, right? You, like, once you have a source of capital, and once people know that that source of capital can make it possible for them to get the things done that they need done, and they can get the money without, you know, a lot of public scrutiny, this is really what greases the wheels of the machine, if you catch my drift. Like the things that Jeffrey Epstein is involved in is just really at the crux of what makes the levers turn. And for that reason, this story will be protected at all costs. Like, if you haven't seen the sequence of events for what they are, let's go back a little ways and think about kind of how this whole situation came to be, right? The left and the right came out originally with the Epstein story by saying that he was evil. Like, oh, this guy's an evil pedophile, like sex trafficking, he's already been convicted. And the problem with that is that once the story came out and people were curious about what Epstein's story was, what did he have to say about it, nobody was really given any information that Epstein, gave out himself. Most of the information was from the victims, and fair enough. Like that, people were obviously whistleblowing. People were coming forward. They obviously were traumatized by this man, and I'm not trying to say he's not evil. Like don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that we didn't really get to see his side of the story because the power structure knew that the story was much more than just. I mean, not to belittle or make it small what happened to those women, but the story was bigger than that. It was much more than just the sex trafficking, and it was much more than it was much more than just sex trafficking. That's what I'm trying to get at. And I think that we have to understand how significant this is, right? The power structure, which is built off of blackmail, which in more ways than one kind of has its origin in the Mossad, and the Mossad and the CIA almost become the same thing at certain levels, and it's kind of splitting hairs to try and figure out how that works. But needless to say, the intelligence agency are the armies, basically the private armies of these pools of capital that execute the agenda of the world. And intelligence is extremely important in terms of power because you need leverage over people. And this, I mean, even regular people understand this. You don't have to be a geopolitical wizard to make this connection. Like if you if you have somebody on video having sex with an underage woman, I mean, you own that man. And not only do you own him just by being his political rival or making more money than him, but for that man's entire life, he will have to do what you say, right? So it's more than just it's more than just leverage on a small level. It's a lifelong commitment of leverage, and that type of leverage is beyond value to an intelligence agency. And so when you think about Jeffrey Epstein, don't allow your mind to immediately go to the sex trafficking, to the sensationalism, to the what they want you to do is to draw you into the downright depravity of the whole situation, which is truly there. I'm not trying to say that didn't happen. I'm just saying that that was one portion of what it was that Jeffrey Epstein represented. And if we get caught on just that one section, if we get stuck on the sex trafficking aspect, we fail to make the connection that this has that implies the entire structure as a whole. And so Democrats were originally portrayed as the Epstein partners, right? It was the Democratic Party, it was the Democrats, it was Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, it was Anthony Weiner, it was the Pizzagate stuff, right? So all of this was happening and was used by the Trump administration in order to portray Trump as an outsider, as somebody who was opposed to these elites. I mean, the all of 4chan was pretty much predicated on this idea that Trump was intending to take down the deep state. This was the mantra, and this was the mythical idea that propped up the entire movement, and the energy that came and solidified itself around Trump. A lot of that energy, especially when it comes to middle class people, that energy was coming from the fact that they had drawn the conclusion that Trump was genuinely, as a man and as an American man, was going to confront these people, was going to confront the people that were blackmailing our politicians, the you know the PDF aisles, the JWs, these types of people who were influencing the government for decades and decades now. Trump really portrayed himself successfully as somebody who was going to challenge that and was going to take it down. And so let me try and explain what I'm not saying again. I'm not saying that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and Anthony Weiner and all of the Democrats, as they're called, are not guilty. I think it's pretty clear that I'm not drawing any specific conclusions, but make of that stuff what you wish. The P-gate situation with the pizza place, the guy that went there and just happened to shoot the hard drive, the thing is crazy. All right, it's very clear that something's going on. My only point is to say that when the system, when the elite, when the managerial class is allowing a very specific movement to occur with a very specific thrust to it, it's important for us to take a step back and think, why would somebody want me to believe that? Why would right wing campaign financiers and PR people and marketers, why would they want me to believe that Jeffrey Epstein was really only connected to the Democrats, right? Once you start thinking in this way, you're thinking along the lines of the target of propaganda, and that's what you have to be thinking, because truly, you know, we are the mark. Like right-wing dissidents, people who are not fully invested in the liberal paradigm, all of the propaganda and the manipulation is directed at us, right? So when you think about this commitment that the intelligence agencies have to changing or manufacturing consent and this kind of thing, you have to always remember they're not out there trying to brainwash people that already watch CNN, right? The psyops are not for them. The important ones are for everybody, but the specific ones are for people on the right wing who are awake and who are aware enough to be sensitive to the things that matter, but maybe not necessarily aware enough to make the proper response, right? And so I want people to understand, when somebody like Epstein says, Donald Trump and I were very close friends for 15 years, right? Um, when somebody like Epstein dies under the circumstances that he dies, and let me be clear, I'm not blaming Trump as though like there's, you know, a grand conspiracy that Trump needed Epstein to die or anything like that. I'm just saying that it's very clear that Trump had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, right? And it was extensive. It was more than a decade, and they were very close, and both of them said that in public. They were close friends. Epstein said to Michael Wolff, he considered himself one of Trump's closest friends for more than a decade. They had a falling out supposedly over a real estate deal in Palm Beach where Donald Trump, Epstein originally bid $36 million for this Palm Beach property, and he brought Trump there to see it and ask him about how he could move the pool after he bought it. And Trump saw it and liked the house, and he went behind Epstein's back supposedly and put a $40 million bid on the house and bought it out from under him, right? So that's the story that the public's told. Now I don't know. I don't know how true that is. I do believe Epstein, though. I do believe he was friends with Donald Trump, and we have videos of them partying together. They shared private jets. They were similar in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not saying Trump is guilty of the same things that Epstein is, but I am saying that to pretend like these two men in Manhattan they are the, you know, they're the James Bond type of guys. They are womanizers. They love money. They love power. They love being in the halls of finance, and they love the deals. They love making deals. Like, I mean, think about it. It's very clear that they were similar, you know. And you know, it's perfectly possible that when Trump, you know, when Trump came to, and Epstein was kicked out of Mar-a-Lago, and Trump decided he was going to cooperate supposedly with the investigation, you know, it's possible that Trump maybe had like a come to the light event, and he kind of saw Epstein for what he was. But I mean, it's very, very, very difficult for me to believe that. It's very, very difficult. And to be honest, like, it should be difficult for you to believe that too. If you do want to draw that conclusion, you know, hey, all the power to you. I think though, in order to believe that, you're going to have to tell yourself a lot of crazy things about all of the other events that have happened in the context of, you know, Trump saying that he had this come to the light moment, re Jeffrey Epstein. So there's not going to be a release of the client list. Nobody's ever going to see that stuff. And it's not because, I don't even think it's because necessarily Trump doesn't want it to happen. I mean, it's very possible that he does, but the structure itself is more valuable than Trump, right? And BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, Raytheon, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, the Mellon Banking Group, JP Morgan, right? All these people, the people who really make the system work, they have no interest, 0% interest in allowing their cakewalk to be destroyed by this goofy Jewish Manhattan pedophile, right? That got caught basically. And I just, when you have to look at things in context. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves and we look at the situation with Epstein, we look at the way that the people in Trump's orbit have responded to the situation, the whole thing is just so, it's bad, man. It's really bad and obvious. Like, and for anybody who's not willing to see that, I just think that I think that you're committed to a bias that you're not willing to accept. And I understand, I get it. Like, and I'm not saying I know for sure. I mean, odds that it's likely that we'll never know for sure. But when we think about the way that things have happened and the response that we've seen, man, you have to be some level of a plan truster to continue riding that train. So, I hope that people will consider it more. But Julian Assange said about Epstein, he said, you weren't misled by accident. You were given a version of the truth so rehearsed, so repeated that even doubt started to sound like denial, right? And so the process of the psyop is always the same. It starts off with a huge pushback. Tons of people are in on it. People are saying we've got to pay attention to the truth. It's very obvious this was a lie. 6 months goes by, less people talk about it. 12 months goes by, less people talk about it. I mean, the more time you put and the less actionable information that comes out, the less likely we are to find out about anything. And I think for Trump, I was willing to suspend my disbelief for quite a while, and I've had some phases as far as Trump goes. Like in 2016, I was genuinely excited. Um, the speeches that he gave, his disposition towards the Jewish financiers, and I mean that was a really inspiring time to be considering outside of the box politicians. And looking back now, it's very clear to me that it was a deception. And at the time I knew that too. And that's what I meant about the phases, is there's a part of you that wants to believe in it, because the reality is that we want to see things get better. Like we all really do want that. And so that's always the draw of the political movement, is